record, and I'm going to share my screen. Let's see here. Okay. Can you see this? It's full screen, right? Loading.
Perfect.
Cool. So, what? Can you see, or is it a black screen, or is it?
It says part of this slide didn't load.
Okay.
Oh, there it is.
Cool. So, welcome to Coalition Building 101 Advocacy Workshop. We are doing a series of these workshops this year, 6 in total, possibly more, but no less than 6. And this is the 4th one in the series. So if you missed any, they're all on our website. I can share the link later too. And there's a few more to come as well. Thank you for coming too. I'm sure I know both of you, so I know that you're both familiar with the bike and pedestrian side of what Bike Pittsburgh does. But I just figured that we could start off, since I don't think the two of you know each other, to start off with introductions. Just say your name, your neighborhood, and then just so I know what you're hoping to get out of this session, if you could just tell me what you're hoping to learn today, and then as an icebreaker, something that is new that you've learned recently. It doesn't have to be brand new, or it could just be anything, but I thought we could share that, and then we'll jump into the presentation. And welcome, Lindsay. We just started and we were just doing introductions. So I can start and then I'll pass it over to Lolly. But my name is Anna Tang. I am the community organizer for Bike Pittsburgh. I currently live in the Friendship neighborhood of Pittsburgh. Today, I really just want to learn what you want to get out of this, and then I will hopefully hear about your struggles, or what you and your bike ped group, or what you and your neighborhood are getting through. And something new that I learned recently is that turnips are a winter crop, and hopefully I'm going to have a winter garden this year, so that's exciting. I'll pass it over to Lolly.
Sorry, I was changing locations. Hi, I'm Lolly Walsh, and I currently live in Highland Park, but I am going to be moving in about a half an hour, after living here for about a half an hour, to Shady Side after some transitions with my roommates. And I work with the program Move PGH, which was recently called Move 412 until we were requested to change it by the mayor. And let's see, what would I like to learn today? I guess I'm looking for some effective strategies for doing outreach in the time of the pandemic. And also for, just improved things with changing technology, and how to make sure that we don't, or I don't, isolate people who don't have access to the same amounts of technology. And something I learned recently, that the fare proposals changes from the Port Authority are going to address something that has vexed me forever, which is that weekly passes and monthly passes start on Sunday to go Sunday to Sunday, and monthly ones start at the beginning of the month, regardless of the person who's using them. And so I'm very excited for the modernization of that and making it flexible for the user.
Very cool. Thomas, do you want to go next?
Sure thing. Hello, everyone. My name is Tom Hill. I am over in Etna. I'm the founder and organizer of the ETPEDS, which is the pedestrian group over here. What I'm hoping to get out of this session today is to effectively create relationships and maintain them without putting upon others too much, like recognizing what is an appropriate level of an ask for someone, and at the same time limit what I am willing to give at the same time, recognizing our own limitations as a small as a small group. Um, Something I've learned, gosh, I just spent a week long, I just spent the past week at an education research conference and my brain is mush and I can't remember anything I learned there. So I'll go with this. I just learned of a company in Pittsburgh called Worm Return that will come pick up kitchen waste and compost it for us. And I'm a failed composter, so I'm very excited to get that service up and running because they do come over to Etna. So
Oh,
thank
wow.
you.
That's so cool. Lindsay.
Hello. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, you're a little faint, but I can hear you.
Yeah, my computer has that issue. I'll just try to yell at you. I apologize if it's yelly. My name is Lindsay. I live in Troy Hill. Um, I'm here today because both personally and professionally, I work on community levels. So today I wanted to learn just more about advocacy and here's some ideas about how to work with and inspire and organize communities, and what to do with disorganization too, like how to let things run if people are just doing their own thing toward the cause. um, and I was late because I was taking my compost to the compost and was chatting with a neighbor. So Thomas, yes, compost. I have worms, but I have yet to set them up in my house. But they're great. Anyway, what else? Oh, something I learned recently is that I really like I really like foraging, and I've been doing it for a few years. But apparently, I have been foraging ramps very wrong. If you are into foraging or know someone who is, only take 2 or 3 leaves. Don't take the root system because you will destroy the population. So that's something I've learned.
Good to know. Yeah. I don't forage often, but I have in the past, and I will keep that in mind. I just also wanted to say, since we are such a small group, and just in case I'm not incorporating all of your questions, because I have these slides and sometimes I just like start talking and I forget. So just please stop me if you have a question at all. Don't, I don't think we need to be super formal. You don't need to like raise your hand or anything. Just unmute and ask away. So this hopefully can be very casual and fun. So next, we're just going to get right into the meat of it. So coalition building. So what is a coalition? A coalition is a group of specific people and or organizations that come together for the purpose of gaining more influence and power than the individual organizations or people can get on their own. That seems pretty obvious, but I just wanted to start off with that so that we're all on the same page when it comes to like what we're talking about when we're talking about a coalition, because it can mean different things to different people. So when I'm talking about it just means this. So coalitions, they can be permanent or temporary. So they can, just being organized around a single thing, or a single topic or issue, or they can be permanent, like very formal, and they can last, until everybody kind of like dissolves or the different groups dissolve. They can be single, like about a single topic, or they can be multi-issue. So like you could form a coalition just around biking, or it could be biking and walking, or it could be biking, walking, and busing, like it can be on anything that you want it to be on. You just have to define it. And they can also be geographically defined, so like if you wanted to form a coalition just for Etna, and it's just the Etna coalition, or a district or a city or a state. So it can go very small and like hyper local, or it can get very large. And depending on what your issue that you're working on or your topic or whatever it is that you are trying to organize around will define how far out of a reach you want to go for your topic. And we'll get into a little bit later about like who you would reach out to that might define your geography. And they can be limited to a certain constituency. So like kind of like what I mentioned before, like biking, walking, or mobility groups. And most often it's going to be a combination of all of these things. So like you might be a permanent organization, but the coalition is just temporary, et cetera. So it's a whole range of stuff. So at the end, so like when you're first starting out, you might be like, why would I even form a coalition when like I could just do this work all on my own, or like it sounds like it's too much effort. So like, why would I even do this? So there are a lot of advantages and disadvantages to forming a coalition. So the advantages are that you have power in numbers, so you can win together basically, what you can't alone. Like if you're trying to get something passed for your neighborhood, it's a lot easier if you band together with your neighbors to like, you know bring that composting bin to your community garden. Or but if you were just doing that alone, it might take a lot longer, or it might not even happen. They're usually formed around like complex issues which require a large number of people and many resources to win, kind of like what Lolly was talking about earlier, doing this move PGH. It's like a huge complex issue trying to solve mobility issues for the entire city, so it requires a lot of people getting on board and a lot of resources, from money to like maybe just people power to like time. It can also help you build your own organization. So like Thomas was talking about, his Etna Pedestrian Alliance. Maybe he wants to like make some inroads with other groups, which would like possibly build his membership base. So that's another advantage. It can make your work more effective. So like if you're tying in a lot of groups that have a common goal, it'll definitely bring an effectiveness to it that you wouldn't gain on your own. It can expand the understanding and experience of your group. So, maybe you want to bring somebody in that's like has a different perspective as far as like law or finance or something that maybe you and your group on your own don't have, but you need that expertise. And that might be a way to like reach out. So like, for example, your bike ped coalition, doesn't have legal expertise, but of a legal entity that deals with environmental things. And that might be like a good group to bring in that type of expertise, or why you would want to form a coalition with them. Sharing resources kind of goes without saying. And then overcoming barriers of culture and history. So sorry about that. A lot of times, like you really just can't know all of the culture or history that has gone on in a certain area. And so inviting all of the people who might have that understanding would be good or a reason to form a coalition. And then I just wanted to see if you guys could think of anything else of like why you would want to form a coalition. Or like why you yourself might be thinking about forming a coalition.
So Anna, you know that Chris and I from Walk Bike Shaler have a pretty decent working relationship, and we have a kind of an unofficial one going right now, and that's because a lot of our pedestrian needs are the same. Mount Royal Boulevard, which you'll hear him talk about, starts off in Etna as Butler Street and then becomes Grand Avenue and then becomes Mount Royal. And then below that, down the hill, is Little Pine Creek Road, which we are currently developing a trail system for as well. So I think coalitions would be good for groups in specific areas who might share the same infrastructure.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Does anybody have anything else you'd like to share?
I suppose you can spread out the work so to reduce burnouts and also have a greater opportunity to give other people more authority sort of and ways to get involved in issues that they're concerned about, even if they don't have a way to do it in a professional capacity.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would just add for our organization, like for work, I'm with Allegheny Land Trust, and we're always trying to like build a value for land conservation, even on city scales, and then kind of help expand our organization's work into the city scale. And so I think just forming a coalition helps with education too.
Yeah, definitely. in the sharing resources on this, Lolly kind of made me think of what you were talking about with the strategies during the pandemic. So like, if you were forming a coalition maybe with, a sign language interpreter group or like people with disabilities or an ADA community, like that might be a good reason to do it, especially now. I am so sorry. There's so much noise outside. You can tell people just got off work. But heading over into the disadvantages. So it can be a time suck. More people, there's like more time you have to put into it, more opinions, all of that. Sometimes there can be too many compromises. So like in order to find a solution to whatever issue you're working on, let me just close my door. Sorry. My room is really dark, but I was trying to open the door to have a little bit more light. But you can, to get back to it, you can have too many compromises. So like, you're giving in to something maybe that you would necessarily take more of a stance on just to make sure that the coalition is surviving. You could fail to receive individual credit if that's something that you're worried about. Maybe your group wouldn't get the credit even though you're the champion within the coalition who pushed something forward, and you have to give the credit to the whole coalition. There can be an inequity of power, so the range of experience, resources, and power can create internal problems. Like, is there a group that's kind of surfacing to the top and making it feel like it's not being fair? And another disadvantage is like by associating with other people or organizations, your group may also be associated with the negative aspects of those members. So they're just kind of different things to like take into consideration as to like why you would form a coalition. So getting started. So the first step in creating or forming a coalition is to identify your issue. And this is huge because planning goes such a long way into getting a goal and knowing exactly what you're doing. And your issue can be anything, can be anything that you all stated at the very beginning, like from what's an effective way to like, maintain something to like learning more about like what's going on in your region, or just like something very time sensitive, like, I just want to know what's happening like right now, like during the pandemic or something like that. So before you start reaching out to every last person or group you can think of, you need to know your issue. So a lot of times people will just be like, I want to do this, so I'm going to reach out to like every single business on Main Street and every single community group that I know of. And like, I'm just going to ask everybody to join this and it's going to be great. But if you haven't identified your issue, you might be reaching out to the wrong people. So when you're identifying your issue, you want to really think about like, what do you want to work on? Like, what exactly is it? What are your goals? And what do you want to accomplish with this issue? So whether you're working on one specific issue or an entire campaign, setting those goals will help you think about who you really need to talk to and like who would want to participate in this coalition. So a general example, and this is something that I just wrote up because we're like in the middle of it. So for example, make Shadyside a safer area for people to bike and walk. So that could just be very generic. So what do you want to work on? You want to work on getting bike lanes on the major throughways and fix missing sidewalks. So what are your goals? So you want to identify the streets that need better areas to bike and walk. And you want to make the bikeability and walkability of the neighborhood better. And with this issue you want to accomplish, you want to be able to make the whole neighborhood safer for everybody on these streets. Jumping into another example, like if you were doing an entire campaign based on that issue, like say getting bike lanes on Ellsworth. So like, what do you want to work on? You want to work on getting bike lanes on Ellsworth between Negley and Neville, which is like the connection to the trail on one side and then connections to like grocery stores on the other. So your particular goals are identifying the organizations in the neighborhood and on the street who are for and against the project. You want to reach out and form relationships with everybody who would be involved in this, and hopefully by the end of it, you will complete the bike network in this area. And so once you've identified your issues, so in that last one, the issue is like, making a bike connection through Shadyside, you want to then strategize. So you want to ask yourself, like, who has the power to make the change that I need to achieve the goal for this issue? So this isn't necessarily who should be involved, but who ultimately can make the change or the thing that it is that I'm wanting to, ultimately get done with this issue. So when you're thinking about that, the targets are going to help you identify the most important people or groups that you'll need to reach out to. So you can separate the targets into 3 different subsections. So primary are the specific people who have the power to make the change you seek. And those, I'll give examples on the next slide. And then secondary are the people who have influence on the primary targets, and the public are the segments of the public that you'll need to address. So they all kind of work symbiotically, but ultimately you need to start with the person who has the actual power to change what it is. And if you're not working on a specific campaign or a specific issue necessarily, but you're just looking to do something maybe like internally with your organization, you can still think of it this way, because even internally you might want to like strategize your own group into like these 3 different categories of like thinking. So examples of targets. So primary could be like your council person, a municipal leader, it could be like the person who runs PennDOT. It could be Karina Ricks, who's the director of DOMI. It could also be engineers. Maybe you need to convince the engineers who are actually drawing the designs to do it. Can anybody think of other primary targets? Or if this has jogged maybe like a specific idea or issue for you, you can be very specific if you're thinking of something like that.
Since Thomas brought up Gertie's Woods, I'll talk about that. We just protected this green space, and there's not obvious and or safe or available access to the existing trails.
Mm-hmm.
So thinking about primary points of contact for us, that would be the municipalities of Reserve and Millville, who have control of some of the land where we could foreseeably create access, and who would, at the end of the day, say yes or no to where we want to help people access trails.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Does anybody else have anything? So secondary targets would be the people who are, influencing the primary, which could be, like that. We all know a local resident or vocal residents who might be for or against something, and they could be a secondary target. Community leaders, parents, and other people. And it's also good that when you're identifying these targets that you find like their names. So like you could come up with a list and just say like how I have it here, like community leaders, but that's not good enough. Like when you're actually coming up with a list, you really need to like find the name and email of the person or people that you want to invite. I'll go through the public too: council persons, schools, churches, business owners, and now I'll open it up to like, do y'all have secondary or public examples that you can think of? So like, for example, for Etna Pedestrian Alliance, like if maybe you're trying to like grow your audience, the primary target could be you yourself, like you want to grow your organization. So secondary people might be local local people who you see just out biking and walking who you want to invite. And then like public people could be like other organizations who you know in Etna, like Friends of the Riverfront, who you would want to like bring in and maybe form a relationship with. If there's no questions, I'm going to move on. So the next thing is step 3. So you want to identify groups and or people to work with. So groups and people to work with are a little bit different than just coming up with your target, who are like a specific person, and then wrapping all or focusing on all of your subgroups to that target. So this is where you can make a list of specific people, groups, and organizations that can help you with your issue. So these involve kind of like what we already went through, which would be the specific person at the city, your council person, your municipal governance, state road inspectors, local community groups. If there's like a powerful business that's, you know, been in your community for years and years, and you just know that they have that say for like what happens, even if, you know, there's other people whose consideration should be taken into consideration. Church groups often get overlooked. And who else? I want to open it back up again, like for who else, what other groups or people would you want to work with?
I think it's important to also consider schools and daycares and childcare facilities, because oftentimes a lot of the decisions we can make can directly impact them, of students coming to and from school and things like that.
Definitely, yeah. Another group that's not on here are like elder care facilities or like nursing homes, and just making sure, you know, that jogged my memory to like, you know, think of like on the equity side of things, like making sure you have all age ranges, like from the very young to the very old. And then like, not necessarily if depending on what your issue is, but like usually you want to have that diverse group or diverse perspective of people like within your coalition too, not just making sure you have the diversity in groups that you're working with. So moving right along. So the next thing you want to do is to make a list, and you want to make a general list and a specific list. So a general list can be evergreen, kind of like what we've just been like throwing out there. A list of groups and organizations that you want to have permanent relationships with and communications. You know, if you're a bike ped group, you know, myself might be on a general list, or, you know, people who work in your municipality, or maybe like different state or national groups that you might want to just have like that informal but formal communication with on a topic. And then you want to make a specific list that you have like the actual emails and names of people that you want to work with to win over your project. And the two lists can overlap, obviously, but the specific list might not last beyond the project completion. So that's kind of a good thing to note, is that like, you know, if you are working on something, you just want to make sure that you're always kind of like keeping your contacts up to date and somewhere that you could like jog your memory or like go back to if you need to find people's contact information. So then step 4 is to reach out and stay in touch. So this is really important because this is where like the meat and potatoes come in. So relationships with your targets can be as formal or as informal as you'd like. You know, you can set up, you know, pre-COVID, like let's meet every Tuesday, you know, at this coffee shop and really get things going, or like in this conference room and like make this formal, and our coalition is going to meet, you know, like every 4th Tuesday, or, you know, whatever it is, like it can be as formal or as informal as you like. It's really good though to keep the communication consistent. I think that a lot of coalitions end up dissolving, or whatever relationship you form with other people or like with other entities ends up dissolving because the communication ends up not being consistent. So I think that like kind of to Thomas's point at the very beginning, it's like making sure that whatever communication you're doing is sustainable for you, your group, or your coalition, and that somebody has been like assigned to doing that task. Because oftentimes, if you don't assign somebody and if you do something that's unsustainable, it'll end up, someone will burn out, kind of like what Lolly was saying, and it won't end up happening. So making sure that it's consistent and manageable in your communications. It's also really important to keep everyone involved with the issue so that you feel like it's a true collaboration and one person isn't rising to the top or people don't feel like they're being left out. It can go from like decision making abilities and just general influence over anything that you are talking about or that comes up. And just maintaining that collaboration will really help to make sure that everybody is involved at the right level. And you can really honestly kind of going back to the communication, like you can just ask people like what level would you like to see or like what do you feel comfortable with. I think that it's the easiest way to make sure that this happens is to just be direct about it so that everybody can like come to the same agreement. Um, and then finally, for this, making sure that someone in your group is in charge of reaching out and staying in touch and organized. So it doesn't necessarily have to be one person. Usually it's easiest if it's just one person doing all of this. But somebody definitely needs to be on like assigned to doing this specific task. I'm sure you've all been in situations where it's unclear who's going to be taking notes or it's unclear who's going to send out the follow-ups, and then nobody knows if they actually got sent out because so and so thought someone else was doing it. And so if you just, it sounds so basic what I'm saying that but it doesn't always happen, so that's why I'm reiterating it. I'm sure we've all been in those situations. Does anybody have questions about anything so far?
I guess this isn't really as much of a question, but a little bit. This is something that sometimes I'm trying to keep up with and figure out the best ways to stay in touch with many, many people who have different types of ways that they want to be contacted and kept in touch, and trying to make sure that I have or that somebody has the most effective ways and that everybody who needs to can find those resources, is something that I'm still trying to figure out a little bit of how to maintain that with all these different types of I don't know, ways that you can have everything. Like you can have 1,000 Google Docs for things. Somebody, like if you're working in different organizations, like with Move PGH, there's so many different companies. Everybody has different email addresses and backup systems and front systems, and trying to figure out how to keep that consistent is something that I'm always looking for additional ideas about. But this is a really helpful point to focus on, I think.
Yeah, I think like when it comes to outreach, and I think I know what you're talking about, so correct me if maybe I'm just making up assumptions, but like, something that we've been struggling with, and I'm sure everybody kind of has because we were all thrown into this pandemic virtual lifestyle like all at the same time and everybody kind of scrambled. It's like the only people who were used to it were people who had already been working remotely, people who were already working from home, and they kind of had their own system figured out, and they were like, this is no different, my life is no different during the pandemic work wise. So but they're like, special cases. And I think that like over time what people have come to realize is that just like what you're saying, like not everybody has the same access to everything, nor does everybody receive information, or can they receive information in the same way. So I think when it comes to stuff like that, just making sure that everybody knows all the channels that stuff is coming in on, whether that's through, a centralized like phone number or, kind of like what you're saying, like the 3,000 Google Docs or, like whatever online check system everybody has to tag people and create workflows and all that kind of stuff. I think when it does get that out of hand or that complex, um, just making sure that everybody knows like what documents or like where information can come from, because I think your situation is similar to like our Move Forward PGH, which it unfortunately has very similar names, but it's like you have an Engage site, you have a website, you have the city's resources, you have 311, you have, local community groups, you have Nextdoor that's, only available to be seen by people who live in that area. You have social media, and you have people's personal emails. And so I think just making sure that everybody knows like what platform is for what can help with that. And that's really the only recommendation I have, is just making sure everybody knows. But yeah, Lindsay, did you have a comment or question? Saw you unmuted.
Yeah, we also struggle with that, like consistent communication channels. And I feel like we just accept that we always have 4 or 5, depending on the project. um, but something I'm curious about is like having like what to do with the coalition if a goal is realized, but like I'm thinking of Gertie's Woods and that access thing I've sort of made up because we're not there yet. But we had this coalition of organizers to help us protect the green space, and then when the green space was protected, now communication has kind of stopped. It was like, all right, we did it. See you later. And I want to keep that going, but realistically, we have 10 more projects I have to start. So I guess I'm curious about how to transition the coalition, or how to maybe wrap something up. I don't know. Do you have any recommendations there?
Yeah, I mean, I think a celebration, if you haven't had a celebration like that, oftentimes, like all this work and then everybody's put so much work in, and depending on how complex it is, like people leave the group and other people are hired on, and it's like very complex. But a celebration is a really good like way to end something, just have a party. And like another way to stay in touch with the people is possibly, having like an annual check-in, like just like a once a year, like, hey, and like it's the 1 year birthday of this, or like it's the 5 year birthday, or whatever feels right. And I think that like each group is going to be really different, like sometimes if it is a contentious coalition, people can't wait for it to be over, but it's like if it's something really special, like it sounds like you had, where people really want to continue it, you could even propose like a debriefing meeting and asking those same people of like, how do you want to continue like this working relationship or like this formal relationship? And I'm sure that like, from a debrief meeting, which I would recommend just in general when you finish stuff, you might overlap again for like other projects. And that could be a way to continue that going down the road. And even just saying it, like just being like, hey, I don't know, like just being exactly what you said, like, I don't want this to end. I don't know what else we can work on, but like, I think we should all stay in touch. And that's usually when maybe a Google group forms or something, or like an informal something or other happens. But that's what I've seen, or what I can think up of like right now.
I like that. Thanks. Any recommendations from anyone on how to celebrate with a big group of people right now?
I'll let other people chime in first. Does anybody have something?
I mean, something outside from a distance from now, since the weather is getting nicer, but still it's a little bit of a challenge. I've hardly seen most of the people I work with since I started this job. And trying to figure out something similar, how to even just get small groups of people is challenging, but at least it's spring now. So we have a lot more access available in all sorts of space. And with vaccines, I think celebrations are only inches away from our hands.
Mhm. I've seen people giving like employees or people gift cards. So like here's, $20 if you have a budget, or like even if you have money left over, it's like here's $20, buy yourself lunch. For people who are comfortable, we'll meet in a park. For people who aren't comfortable, like we'll just like zoom you in or something. Um Otherwise, right now it's just really complicated because it's all kind of based off of people's comfort level and like, CDC recommendations. So it's really, I don't know how big your group is, but like I think those are just external factors beyond our control. Um, Tom, have you heard of anything? Any celebration ideas in the time of COVID?
Nothing really beyond just the Zoom calls. I mean, that's pretty much how everybody's been gathering from what I've seen so far.
Yeah. I'll like do anything nowadays too that's like doesn't involve sitting in front of a screen. I'm like very screened out. So I guess I should also say on that note, like, thank you so much for attending another screen session right now. But I'll move on unless anybody has any more questions about this. Okay. So, oh, I forgot that I had this. So here's examples of how you can keep communication going with people. So, you can invite people to your meetings, as you're trying to, form these coalitions or getting these communications happening. Ask how you can help your networks out, tag and share what others are working on social media. So that's a good way of keeping, you know, other people feeling like they're involved in something. Oh, sending thank you notes, that is huge, huge. I don't know how many times council people or anybody I've worked with and like they love getting a thank you note. So even if it's just a thank you email, that goes a long way. You could also invite these people to be guest speakers, at something that you're doing. Since you have that relationship, it's like a good way to continue it. We kind of just went over this, but if this is jogging your mind for like other things, feel free to speak up. But I think these kind of cover a lot of them. I can't emphasize the thank you notes enough. And having a guest speaker too, like, feel free to, if you ever need a guest speaker, like I'm willing to come and guest speak, on any topics or anything like that, because I know time is valuable these days, and having that is useful. So finally, step 5 is to set expectations. We've kind of talked about this a little bit the whole way through, but as part of like creating a coalition and getting things running, and even during, the coalition experience, setting expectations is really important. So you really want to be clear about what your expectations are and listen to what others have to say, so that everybody just continues being on the same page with things. I don't think you can over communicate, but I think you can definitely under communicate. I'm sure we all know that person that just says yeah to something, or like yes, or just responds like heard. And it's kind of nice to just have that like reassured, extra step. And we all know that person who just doesn't respond and you're like, hello, are you there? Did you hear what I had to say? So it's good to like just set expectations and spell them out, make sure everybody agrees to them and is aware of what they are. Um, and I like this phrase that coalition building should be transformative and not just transactional. So, you know, kind of like what, Lolly, you're saying you're working on with like Move PGH, Lindsay, what you're talking about, with your work, and Thomas, like what you're doing over in Etna, everything that you're working on, all three of you, is extremely transformative. Like you are, like in the big picture, like you are literally changing Allegheny County, Pittsburgh region, and you're working towards something that is bigger and better for people, and it isn't you know something that's just you're doing it for yourself or something like that. And when you're forming these coalitions, to help you with this work, you're really looking at these goals and like this big picture network. And so whoever you invite in, or whatever your coalition or whatever issue you're working on, like all of this work is very transformative. And so like, if there is a tense moment, or if you're having trouble doing something, just remember that like all the work that you're doing is really working towards this bigger picture goal of helping to change the whole region. And so it isn't just like, you get one thing out of this and I'll get one thing out of this and it's done. You're really like part of this massive undertaking, and coalition building can be very exciting because of that. And it's not just a one little thing that's happening. So just making sure you're setting expectations and thinking big picture as you work on all the details. So lastly, I just wanted to go over some kind of tips for a successful coalition. These can fit into a lot of different categories, but just to reiterate, have someone dedicated to keeping the outreach and contacts organized, whether that's just you yourself doing it or somebody else, or like a list or whatever. But it's really important to keep outreach and contacts organized. I can't say how many times I wish I did this more regularly, because I have way too many lists different places. If I just done it all at once, I think I'd be better off. So it's good to also choose a unifying common issue to work on instead of something that's really decisive, or it's just like not a good issue. Set realistic goals. So, are you trying to do something, like build Disney World in Etna? Like that is an unrealistic goal to set maybe for one person to do. But hey, if that's realistic for you, then go for it. But it's good to set realistic goals so that nobody feels overworked or that you're working towards something that's unrealistic. Sometimes it's also good to agree to disagree. So I think that healthy dialogue is really important between people. And I think that if people don't share the same opinion, it is a chance to actually have a discussion on something. Because if everybody agreed on the same thing, that's fine. But like sometimes it won't get you to a deeper level, where if you don't agree on something, you could really like find a little bit more beef in whatever you're talking about. So members of a coalition will not agree on everything. So it's really good to like just bring it back to that common agenda while having, a discussion about what it is that you disagree about. It's good to clarify decision making carefully. So a coalition needs to be crystal clear about who and how decisions will be made. So if you do kind of butt heads on something, or a decision does need to be made, it's good to have someone or a way to ultimately decide on a direction or the decision-making process, because it can get complicated, and ultimately a decision eventually needs to be made about things. So it's good to have like that person in power or whatever it is to make that decision. You want to help other organizations achieve their self-interest, and other groups need to believe that they're benefiting from this. So if you're starting it off, and you're trying to get a coalition together and you're just inviting people, you also want to be able to give them back something. So a lot of times it can be something as simple as kind of like what I said before, like tagging them on social media. Like, I think this is like a good example for Bike Pittsburgh because we have, you know, like several thousand people who follow us on various social media. And so just getting a tag in something could have a huge impact versus like maybe another group that's trying to build up that side of things and they only have, you know, a couple hundred followers. This, like that kind of a thing might go a long way or be more impactful, you know, coming from somebody else. But it can also just be, you know, connections. So like, um, you know, if you are having like a bike ped group like Thomas has in Etna and you join with Shaler or, you know, you reach out to Bike Pittsburgh, you could benefit from maybe having that network of people or advice from like a bigger organization or just from other people in a different area. So it's good to like just realize like you're getting something, but what are you also giving? And then achieve real results. So it's really nice to have like this big dream, kind of like what I just said in the other slide, but it's also even better to actually get whatever you're working on done. So at the end of the day, coalitions must achieve something that, you know, those SMART goals, you want to do something that's concrete, measurable, and clear to the other organizations. Otherwise, the coalition probably will dissolve and be not as strong as you would want it to be, you know, as people realize like, oh, this was just kind of like for fun. It's not actually real or we're not really getting towards anything. And an organization's ability to survive and thrive depends on the amount of public credit it receives. Coalitions that try to ignore this fact are headed for trouble. So just wanted to reiterate that. And then finally, I guess I should say, do you have any questions on what I just had up? I can go back to it, I think, yes. Are there any questions about these tips? Or anything in general? I think I've kind of answered people's questions. Do people feel like I've answered your questions? Or could I dive a little bit deeper into anything you were wondering about?
I think that was a very thorough presentation, and the question that I had earlier about the perhaps outreach and technology challenges was not really right for the coalition question.
Yeah, it's okay. I think it is hard because the pandemic is such a like specific time, you know, but I think that whatever we are doing now brings up or makes us realize where our shortcomings are, like within a group or like within an organization. You know, like I've definitely realized that I know nobody who does sign language interpretation or you know, different things like that. So I don't know if that really answers, or like, and as far as strategies go, just making sure that you are reaching out to like everybody, you know, on an equity standpoint. So like, you know, are you really including, you know, different languages or people whose English isn't their first language, kids, older adults, and just having ways that they all feel comfortable participating. I think I already said that. Anybody else? If not, just thank you so much for attending. Feel free to reach out to me with anything, any questions, any follow-up. If you think of something, you know, later that you were like, I wish I'd asked, you know, just reach out to me. I'm more than happy to answer any questions or help you with strategizing. We do have a whole toolkit on forming campaigns and different aspects of it. And I'm more than happy to sit down one-on-one with anybody to like help you strategize or formulate a campaign or doing anything like that. So don't hesitate. You can always ask and I can always say no if it's something that like isn't in our capacity to do or anything like that. But I'm so thankful that you were able to come. Is there any other questions before I end this, or anything people would like to say?
Just thank you. It's good to see this laid out clearly. Like, I don't know. I feel like I see this in action when other people are doing it well, but seeing the anatomy of how it comes together is very helpful.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Well, with that, we ended exactly on time, which is amazing. That never ever happens. So I'll let you all enjoy the rest of your evening and beautiful weather that's outside. So thank you for coming, and feel free to tune in to the rest of the advocacy workshops that are going on this year. And please reach out if you have anything. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.